Nigeria's foreign exchange market was liberalized in the year 1995 following the introduction of an autonomous foreign exchange market (AFM) for the sale of foreign exchange to end users by the Central Bank of Nigeria through selected authorized dealers at market-determined exchange rates. In addition, bureau de change operators were once more accorded the status of authorized buyers and sellers of foreign exchange. The foreign exchange market was further liberalized in the year 1999 following the return of democracy with the introduction of an interbank foreign exchange market (IFM). The bank adopted the retail Dutch auction system (RDS), wholesale Dutch auction system (WIDES), and interbank rate system regime between 2002 and the year 2015. And of course, in that period, the RDS and WIDES entailed auctions twice a week, while the RDS was to customers, the WIDES was to the banks, who in turn sold to customers. And in 2016, the CBN introduced the managed floating system due to demand pressure. And of course, afterwards, the value of the Naira in the interbank foreign market, of course, was allowed to be largely driven by forces of demand and supply. And on this premise, of course, in this year, in the month of June, it was reintroduced on a willing buyer, willing seller basis with an operating guideline of 2017 as pressure continues to mount on the Naira. Now, that is the crux of our discussion this morning. And we have our complementary segments for you, of course. Simplify This and the market segment. My name is Leah and then the policy returns in a bit. Of course, as I hinted earlier, the business of the day is on an issue which has refused to go away. That is the strain on the Naira by market forces. But before then, let's take a look at major happenings in the course of the week in Nigeria's economy.
President Bola Tinubu this Wednesday signed the 2023 supplementary budget of 2.17 trillion naira into law. The Senate and the House of Representatives last Thursday passed the supplementary appropriation bill after a third reading. However, the Senate Committee on Navy chaired by Senator Gbenga Daniel says it will investigate issues around the 5 billion naira presidential yacht contained in the budget, which has caused public outcry in 1 week. The Central Bank of Nigeria has again reiterated that there are sufficient banknotes across the country and every banknote issued by the Central Bank of Nigeria remains legal tender and should not be rejected by anyone, as stipulated in Section 20, Subsection 5 of the CBN Act 2007. Director Corporate Communications of the bank, Isa Abdulmumin, in a statement said branches of the CBN across the country have been directed to continue to issue different denominations of old and redesigned banknotes in adequate quantities to deposit money banks. The CBN said no one should refuse to accept the Naira as a means of payment and advised the public to guard against panic withdrawals. While affirming that there is sufficient stock of currency notes to facilitate normal economic activities, the Apex lender advised members of the public to continue to embrace other modes of payment to reduce the pressure on the use of physical cash. Fitch Ratings this week affirmed Nigeria's credit rating at B- with a stable outlook. In a new report, Fitch said Nigeria's rating is supported by a large economy, a developed and liquid domestic debt market, and large oil and gas reserves. However, the report noted that weak governance, structurally very low non-oil revenue, high hydrocarbon dependence, security challenges, high inflation, low net foreign exchange reserves, and ongoing weakness in the exchange rate framework are key concerns. While affirming Nigeria's outlook as stable, the agency said the government has taken important steps to reduce fuel subsidies and reform the exchange rate framework much more quickly than anticipated and has ambitions to substantially raise revenue. Fitch said that the reform progress since President Bola Tinubu's government came into power in May 2023 has been faster than it had anticipated, but new data on the Central Bank of Nigeria suggests its net foreign exchange position is substantially weaker than expected. The Debt Management Office DMO this week offered for sale savings bond to retail investors with the promise of a higher return than last month's auction as interest rate adjustments gather pace. The November offer is 139 basis points higher than the 11.07% it went for in October, while the 3-year bond will be sold at 13.46%, also higher than the 12.07% it sold for last month. The notice added that interest will be paid quarterly with coupon payment dates of February 15th, May 15th, August 15th, and November 15th. The offer closes today and settlement date is November 15, 2023. The NNPC ITO joint venture has announced the introduction of Nembe crude oil grade, a new crude oil grade into the international crude oil market. The announcement of Nembe crude oil blend was made at the Argos European Crude Conference in London. OML 29, an asset located onshore Nigeria, is operated by ITO Eastern Exploration and Production Limited, Africa's leading indigenous hydrocarbon producer, following a historic acquisition from Shell in 2014. The Nembe crude was previously blended with the popular Bonny Light grade and exported via the Bonny Oil and Gas Terminal. The Nembe crude oil grade also has a low sulfur content and low carbon footprint due to flare gas elimination, fitting perfectly into the required spec of major buyers in Europe. 2 cargoes of 950,000 barrels each of the Nembe crude oil grade have since been exported to France and the Netherlands, according to a statement by Olufemi Shonoye, Chief Corporate Communication Officer, NNPC Limited. MTN, African telecoms giant, is considering exiting 3 African markets. During its quarterly update call, CEO Ralph Mupita disclosed that the telecoms is engaged in discussions about the potential orderly exit of its operation in Liberia, Guinea-Bissau, and Guinea-Conakry. Although the telecom has yet to reveal why it's leaving these African markets, its financial reports show that it's facing numerous challenges across the West and Central African region. Inflation and currency devaluation across several markets are identified as major concerns.
So I will not bore you with the details of what has happened in the Nigerian foreign exchange market system, which of course has had an overbearing influence on every sphere of life in Nigeria. And I have joining me all the way from Dallas, the immediate past country economist of PwC, Andrew Nevin, joining me virtually. Mr. Andrew, nice to have you on the program this morning.
Good morning. Great to be with you, Leah.
Yeah, great to have you. So, Andrew, could you just walk us through, basically, give us a scenario. What is happening to the Naira?
Well, I mean, I think everyone, of course, knows the Naira was floated when His Excellency President Tinubu came in, and then we've had the official rate move to about 800. We've had the parallel rate move close to 1100 or 1050. It dropped a few days ago to 900. Now it's back over 1000. I mean, the reality is that we need to find a fundamental solution to this issue. And people complain about the Naira because they want to get dollars at 500 or 360 or 600. But that system never worked. And it never worked because basically what was happening was favored actors were getting Naira instead of some other people. And the central bank was selling the few dollars that the country had at lower rates than the market demanded. And that had consequences. And I think one thing that people might be noticing now is there are lots of announcements in the press about people's pension arrears being paid, state employees being paid. They really suffered all over the country because of the system of giving the scarce dollars to the favored actors. But the fundamental problem right now is that we've allowed in the country the hydrocarbon production to drop so precipitously, right? So, why were we having $100 oil and then Nigeria was in deep trouble? It was simply because the hydrocarbon production dropped from 2 million when I came, 1.7, 1.5, as low as 1.0. And of course, we use about 600,000 barrels a day, even after the oil subsidy has been removed. So the net result of that was there were no dollars coming in on that. And it really is the Nigerian government's own fault to allow this crisis to happen, because if we were producing 1.7 or 2 million barrels a day, we wouldn't have this foreign exchange crisis. We'd have a liberalized regime. People would have access to dollars. People could start to do the things they want to do with the dollars, including improving local production. So I've said consistently for the last year, the number one policy or the number one thing the new government should focus on is being able to get that hydrocarbon production back up. Now, it looks like there's a little bit of good news. I mean, I think it was announced for September that the production was back up to 1.7. We haven't seen that. It takes a few months for that to flow through to the exchange rate. So hopefully that number will stay up. But really, the government has to be asking itself real questions about, what's going on over at the NNPC. And sorry for adjusting my camera, but the NNPC, we can't go back to 1.2 or 1.0. We'll continue to have these real problems with the Naira.
Okay, if I may come in here, basically we've had over time nations, we see them practically being productive. Can this oil dollars alone sustain the economy? We've seen, according to Stanbic IBTC, that the PMI has, for the first time in a while, gone below 50 points.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we can't build the entire economy in oil, but it's important, I think, right now to have those oil dollars to do what we need to do. But one of the things that we also said at PwC, and a lot of people have repeated, of course, is that what Nigeria is very good at is people working remotely in global value chains. So if you think about, what can we export? We can export oil and gas, and we need to do more of that. We can export a few agricultural products, cocoa, sesame, for example. But it's very difficult for us to export manufactured goods at the present time because of all the infrastructure problems that we have. So the roads, the ports, the way the customs works, which is a bit the soft infrastructure. So those are real barriers. But we have something even more valuable we can export, which is Nigerian brains. And in this case, because of the increase or the changes in technology over the last few decades, and because of COVID, people understand you can work remotely. And many Nigerians, tens of thousands of Nigerians, hundreds of thousands, some people think, are working in these remote value chains. And that, for me, is the second pillar of our foreign exchange earnings, is that export of Nigerian brains. And of course, I think a lot of people have adopted that. So the new Minister of Information and Technology, Bosun, has gone that route. A number of state governors, including His Excellency Governor Obaseki, have gone that route. And so I think between the pillars of the three pillars, really, the oil and gas, the exporting of brains, and agriculture, that will be enough for us to be very robust in the export sector.
Okay, so if I may come in here, you've started delving into some of the questions I needed to ask you, but basically, how do we marry both the fiscal and monetary policies to give us the desired results?
Well, I think people need to remember monetary policy is a little bit like the driver of a race car, right? So if you have a 1950s race car, it's only going to go in the 1950s. I mean, the fundamental issues around the economy are really structural, the legal framework on that. And then on top of that, then you have the monetary policy. And what you really need to address in the Nigerian economy are the fundamentals. And there's nothing that the central bank governor can do about interest rates that fix the economy. We need structural reforms. We need sensible fiscal policies. We need using good resources, using the fiscal resources in the right way. And I think, we've obviously seen some progress on that. So, of course, my brother, Taiwo from PwC has also left PwC in the last year, is now the chairman of the fiscal committee. And I think his recommendations over the years, of course, I'm biased, but are very, very sensible. I mean, in terms of the CBN itself, I mean, I think we have an excellent governor. He understands the financial system. But I think it's very important for the CBN to focus on its core mandate. And Governor Cardoso has come out and said that I mean, over the years, of course, we've seen a number of programs come out from the CBN. They were taking on roles that are, let's call them not traditional. So we had the Anchored Borrowers Program, we have various intervention funds. And I think the truth is that when these are investigated, it turns out they don't have much of a result and often are a kind of a source of diversion of funds. So I think the fact that the governor has come out at the CBN and said, look, we're going to focus on our core mandate. We're going to look for price stability. We're going to figure out a way to get the interest rates down. And hopefully we'll be able to improve the foreign exchange system is the right focus. But the hard lifting really for me comes in the people that are doing structural changes, fiscal policy changes to the economy. And I think one issue that is, I think should still be troubling Nigerians is, I mean, and I talked at least for the last 2 years I was in country about this, was can the federal authorities, can the federal government of Nigeria demonstrate that it uses Nigerians' resources wisely? So we always hear this, we only collect 6% in taxes. You have people like the IMF and the World Bank come along and say we need to collect more taxes, increase that up to 15% over a few years. Our view, and my personal view, was always, why would you increase taxes when we can't show that the resources are used wisely? So we say to the population, we want more taxes, yet the money goes to refineries that don't produce any refined crude. It goes to projects that don't have any result. It goes to the SUVs, which I can't even remember the numbers, at $160 billion for the SUVs for the members of the NAS. So Nigerians, I think, are rightly saying to themselves, why should I be paying more taxes when the money is not used wisely? So I think it's very important for the federal government at this stage to start to send some signals that it actually is going to use money wisely.
There's a crisis situation, yes. Nigerians are in need of dollars, yes. So for the average Nigerian out there, what does this mean for his or her economic well-being?
Well, I think that, as I said, the only short-term solution that I can see is really hydrocarbon production going up. I mean, that is the quickest way. I mean, we're going to continue to have the export of grains, but that takes a little more time. Not that it takes years and years, but it happens and you're just slowly ramping up and continues to ramp up. I mean, one of the things that's really driving the exchange rate crisis, of course, is so many people that are on the Japa route. And I mean, I'm sure you know many people, I know many people, and you look at all the fees the British charge, the Canadians charge, the US charge, and then the people have to get flights abroad, they get there and they haven't got a job, they have to start to pay rent. So all of those things are really driving up as well the demand for foreign exchange, which is, of course, hurting the Naira. So one thing that would make a big difference, of course, is if the government made it better to live in Nigeria. I mean, why are people leaving Nigeria? They're leaving because the electricity system doesn't work, the security system doesn't work, the education system doesn't work. Why not go to a country where at least they can get a job? Even if they have to start again at the bottom of the ladder, they can get a job. The kids get education. Certainly in Canada, in the United Kingdom, they get state education at no cost. They get healthcare at no cost on that. So as long as we have a situation where it's unattractive to live in Nigeria, you're going to have the middle class and upper middle class continue to leave. And that puts enormous pressure on the exchange rate. So I think that, as I said, oil and gas production is primary, but in the short term too, if we could make some progress and people just wanted to be in Nigeria, including some people who wanted to return and take advantage of the potential opportunities, I think we could see the pressure come off the Naira really quickly.
Okay, so before I let you go, I would like to take this question. We've just heard some hours back, would I say some days back, that the NNPC and AITO have discovered a new blend of crude and have actually made the first shipment. What do you make of that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great development forward to get the grades of crude that are more in demand around the world, and it's great that the NNPC has done that. I mean, I think the question is, can they ramp up the production that fast enough to really move the needle on the foreign exchange situation on that? But at a general level, I think Nigerians should be asking themselves about NNPC. How did this happen? I mean, how did oil get to $100 and the country was suffering so much? And I've been a little surprised with the new administration that they haven't taken more aim at what's going on at the NNPC. I think Nigerians rightly should be asking themselves for some sort of audit. And of course, NAS has been asking about what they claim are, I think, about $1.5 billion of unremitted funds over the last few years. So if you think about His Excellency President Tinubu, he came in very quickly and said the CBN was not acting in accordance with the best interest of Nigeria and took action there. There hasn't been any similar action or scrutiny, it seems to me, at the NMPC. And that to me is a little bit surprising, because if you ask, again, fundamentally, the economy still needs the oil and gas dollars. We haven't been getting them. People have been suffering, and yet there's been kind of no audit or investigation of what's happened at the NMPC. So that, I think, again, it goes back to what I said a little earlier, that people perceive that the government still is not serious about using resources widely in Nigeria. NMPC is the most valuable asset that Nigerian people have. And yet there hasn't been any real look at maximizing the value of that asset and stopping leakages. And, many people, it's difficult from the outside. Well, that's the problem. It's impossible from the outside to know what's going on. The government did announce that it was serious about floating part of the NMPC. So I had said for years, in fact, and I had said it more at the operating level. So groups like NL and G should be partially privatized on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. I had not said the whole NNPC, but that's in fact what the federal government has said. I think that would be a fantastic step forward, because it would really drive accountability of the NNPC, something that we haven't seen. And I think the government has lost kind of 6 months on this issue. I really expect in June that His Excellency the President would take steps at the NNPC. But it's a great move, great news that they've got a new blend of crude that's in demand around the world. That means we'll get more of a premium for the crude we produce. But we need the numbers to go up, and we need that number, the increased production proceeds to flow back to the Nigerian people.
Okay, so do you agree with the school of thought that says that we're going to find a sort of safe haven for the Naira before the year runs out?
I think my view is very clear. If the oil production really is at 1.7 and it continues at 1.7 or higher, and that flows through to the economy, we will have bottomed out. It can't stay at 1,000. Just the mathematics of it. If we're getting some real revenue piling from the crude, because remember, there was no inflow to the federal government for at least 18 months to the Federation account from NNPC because of the foil subsidy and because of the low production. So if we've actually reversed that, it will stabilize the Naira on that. And, I don't want to, people know I never make predictions, but if I had to make a prediction, it just seems to me, the government came out originally, I think it said about 600. Inflation is still high, maybe 700 to 800, but we need that oil revenue to flow through in dollars into the economy. I think the fact that the CBN is clearing away the backlog is a good thing, because of course, under the new rules, there's no new backlog will be created. People have to find their own FX at essentially a market rate, whether it's the parallel or the CBN window. So if they clear away the backlog, that also removes a big drag on the Naira. So, I'm hoping that with the crude production increase, we're in better days and that we've seen the bottom of the Naira. It'd be disappointing if it went above 1,100.
Okay. I must sincerely thank you, Andrew, for your time.
Leah, it's great to see you.
Great to see you too, and you have a nice one.
My name is Aldo Kori.
Keep watching The Policy with Leah.
It aims to provide policymakers an opportunity to explain their policies in a way that members of the public affected by those policies can understand and engage with those policies.
Keep watching The Policy with Leah.
A major productivity gauge is the Purchasing Managers Index PMI, and so we've decided to simplify that for you, and from there we go to the market square. Well, there you have it. For more details on market rates across the country, do well to log on to our sister website, www.marketnigeriatv.com. Also be informed that this episode and all the previous ones are available on YouTube on our channel. You can always send your feedback, your questions, your comments and suggestions because we value them. Join us again same time next week. My name is Leah saying have a beautiful day and God bless Nigeria.